the way films used to be released, and just looking out here, there's a number of you who were around when this happened, it used to be called a platform release, where a film would be released in New York for a few weeks, and it would get some positive word of mouth and some good coverage in the New York Times. And then a couple weeks later, it would maybe go to Chicago or Boston or Philadelphia, and it would expand, and maybe it would go on a road show where it would go to Cleveland, then Pittsburgh, then Miami, and it would go around the country collecting positive word of mouth. And when it finally came to you, you were excited to see it, and you'd heard about it in Time magazine, or if you subscribed to some of the movie magazines back then, you'd go see it. But it became such an urgent thing to get that film in front of everybody all at once that sort of discovery process of discovering a film was lost. One of the last films that has really undergone that discovery roadshow process that I can think of is My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which was released in a handful of theaters and became an unexpected success. They didn't anticipate this. The company that distributed it thought that it was going to be just a real modest little fun film, and audiences began flocking to it. And so they ended up having to make more prints and spend more advertising and do it more and more. Because they hadn't anticipated it at the front end, they didn't have it all ready to go to just push out. So it was a gradual, many weeks process of just cranking out the films, the number of prints that they could to distribute. And audiences discovered it that way. And it just kept building, and people went to see it multiple times. That's what the way that cinema used to be. Now we've got it so that we're seeing the grosses, the box office grosses, in the newspaper every Sunday night or Monday morning. And it's almost like box scores in a baseball game. What film won this weekend? Was that ever the objective? When did film change? When did we look at the amount of money that a film made as being the ultimate goal? I thought it was supposed to be how it reached people or touched you, or what kind of an impact it had. So I got off topic there a little bit. Filmmakers, how does this all impact them? What's happened to them? Well, again, it used to be that if you wanted to work in film, the equipment and the technology was so expensive that the only way you could do it was work your way through the Hollywood system until ultimately you got your break and you made your feature. Till Francis Ford Coppola tells young George Lucas that yes, you can make THX 1138, and it falls flat, and you think you're never going to make another movie again until somebody else gives you your next break. But with the emergence of these specialty divisions, and there are a lot of art house distributors, particularly in New York, lots in LA, that also specialize in this smaller fare, a lot of international cinema. And when I say smaller international cinema, I mean, keep in mind, in America, we've kind of got blinders on, and so when a film like Amelie, or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Life is Beautiful is played here and it's pushed out by a company, we're thinking, where in the world did this come from? This is incredible. But every year, films like that take off around the country in indigenous countries, and we'll never see them. Or if they come to the country, they'll play in New York in a couple theaters. We just do not see the bulk of the cinema that's created in this world. We're lucky if we see a small percentage of it. And that again goes back to my theme of independence. The independence in cinema means having access to that. Independence means having art house distributors and specialty companies that are going to take a risk and spend small amounts of money to bring films and to show them. And the structure that we live in now is built so that David Letterman can promote one film that night and Jay Leno can promote another, and that's how we hear about it. We're going to watch the trailers on Apple QuickTime, and it's not built for discovery. It's built toward maximum impact all at once. So, but in that niche, I keep doing circular logic here, in that niche, filmmakers have found their place in these specialty houses, these specialty companies. And there's many filmmakers who've made a home for themselves by making these specialty films. Obviously, somebody like Jim Jarmusch is a great filmmaker whose work is not broadly commercial, but is very has a broad audience in the specialty market, in the independent or art house market. And there's filmmakers like Sofia Coppola, who started off that way. And there's certainly many other filmmakers who started off making very art house films and progressed into the Hollywood system. We were talking about Tim Burton, who's somebody who I don't know that he's ever even made an independent film, yet his films feel so much like that, which reminds us that again, art can happen anywhere. You can have great cinema made in, with hundreds of $1,000,000 at stake, and it can happen when you've got $30 at stake. Another good film I can think of, by the way, that proves this example of cost and price has no bearing on quality is a film called Tarnation, which was made just a few years ago, if anybody's heard of. It's a documentary. It's a man's made this film about his sort of personal journey about his mother's illness and how she ultimately died, and his sexuality. And he filmed footage of himself and his family for 15, 20 years on just simple VHS cameras and little Super 8 cameras. And when he got old enough, he made a film out of it. And he estimated when it was submitted to Sundance, because it was accepted and played there, that it cost him a grand total of something like $360 to make. Well, I mean, that's a very unlikely story, but it happened. And a company came in and bought it for $1 million and pumped another $1 million or $2 million into it to clean it up and buy the music rights for it and really make it something special, and put it out, and it was very popular. So again, you don't need money to be successful or creative or create art. But as the system kind of over the last few years has kind of ground down and these companies have started to go out of business, filmmakers are finding themselves standing out in the cold, kind of saying, well, what's happening here? Where am I going to show this work? Whereas before there was a defined path, so you don't have to try to go straight to the Hollywood system. There was kind of a ladder. Now that ladder is starting to miss a few rungs, and people are trying to figure out, well, where do I fit in? And the internet and cheaper technology has certainly played a part in that. And you obviously have all heard of YouTube and a lot of the impact that's had on filmmakers. I just would say, though, and I find this whenever I have discussions with other festival directors or people who aren't filmmakers, and even a number of filmmakers, I suppose. I was at the Toronto Film Festival a year ago, and they had before every film they played trailers, and they had a trailer or a commercial from Motorola, which was promoting this big new thing about films on your Motorola phone. And of course, we all know that the iPods and the Apple iPhones, they all have this video technology, and it's great and fun and wonderful. But I look at that and I wonder what filmmaker in the world wants to have their work exhibited on a 3-inch by 3-inch screen and that's it. Like, that's their aspiration. That's certainly not proven to be a moneymaker yet, but this whole brave new world of digital technology has opened up new avenues for films to be exposed. And I think it's really exciting because on things like YouTube, people vote for what they like and they vote for what they want to see. And people view over and over what they want to see, and they'll recommend it to their friends. So there's no money in it, but there's an awareness building in it. So as a filmmaker, you can get your work seen by more people than you perhaps could have if your film was distributed in a theater. And to give you that sort of side of the story, I want to tell you about a film called Ballast, which is a film that played at the Sundance Film Festival this year. It was produced by directed by a filmmaker. I think his name is Lance Hammer. It's a great sort of porn name, I think, but he's a filmmaker, so not that I know anything about porn, by the way. Lance made this film, and it was well received critically at Sundance, which is to say, it was a bleak and depressing film. Sundance is known for that, but it had a lot of admirers, and a lot of people really were behind it. It's a story of a rural black man who tries to commit suicide after his brother is killed. He survives, and his brother's widow and his nephew basically move in with him, and it's about all these obstacles and challenges they overcome to sort of move on with their life. The ballast of life, I guess, is the analogy there. The film screened, and all the distributors saw it, and IFC, which is one of the, many of you may have that on your TV channel, but they also purchase films, and they have a theater in New York that they program, and they show films from all around the world, all these independent films. They purchased it, and they were the only ones that wanted to do so at that, I guess. The thing is, the way the business model has become, all that they were really going to buy the film for was $60,000 or $80,000. So independent films and independent filmmakers do not make a lot of money. That should be clear. There are some rare exceptions. We can talk about some of those later, but this example is one that I think is the standard versus the rule versus the exception. So Lance and his production team, they sell their film, or they're about to sell their film to IFC. So life is hunky-dory, right? Well, then I guess they start looking at their contract and they start seeing that, well, IFC is really only going to guarantee that this film goes in 1 or 2 theaters. They're really only going to guarantee X percentage of marketing put behind a film. Because these are the kinds of things you negotiate now as a filmmaker. How many theaters is my film going to go into? How much money are you going to put behind it to market it? Are you going to put me on Letterman? You're going to hire a publicist for this? Like, what are you going to do for me?